I'm doing this video about the upcoming new moon in Scorpio. We have this Scorpio cycle for 2015 starting on December 11th, 2015. So sun and moon come together in Jyeshta, Nakshatra, and we kind of hit the reset button on our cycle at that time and reset it to the Scorpio lesson. So Scorpio is the sign where we are gathering a lot of emotional resources, gathering a lot of emotional strength. It's fixed water, where we tend to be fixed about a kind of emotional thing. And this is also, it shows where we have a lot of emotional will, because we have a lot of emotional, energy there. It's where it's all sort of gathered. Fixed signs have a lot of concentrated energy, but it can also be stubborn. It can also be, of course, sort of willful. It can be fixed and like stagnant. So there can be, this is a sign where we can be kind of like emotionally stagnant, emotionally stubborn, but also emotionally deep, and there can be a lot of depth in that sign. But again, I'm not just talking about Scorpios, but the sign of Scorpio, any planets that are there, or for all of us actually, because we're going to be dealing with that cycle, having this emotional depth doesn't mean it's powerful. Just because something is depth isn't necessarily it's not necessarily a compliment. There can be a lot of emotional depth and a lot of, you might say strength, or a lot of, consistency, but it could be erratic. It could be difficult emotions. Just because it's depth doesn't mean it's good. There can be things that are deep and also sort of poisonous and cavernous, or there can be depth, and the depth can lead to, or it can be, a lot of devotion in particular. And with Scorpio, it's a very, usually when we go deeper into the heart, not just the emotions, but deeper into the heart, we get closer to that source of true love and true, selfless love, which takes a form of devotion. Scorpio, though, it's a tamasic sign, so it's also motivated to avoid emotional pain. And so it's really the kind of life lesson where we become aware of those things that are in our life that give us a sense of emotional strength and emotional stability, and this kind of terror, sort of terrified that we're going to lose it, that it might get taken away, or that once I make a commitment or once I love something, then what would my life be without it? Like, no, don't leave. So what can kind of be diabolical about the sign is what happens then. What happens when something, let's say if you have a bunch of planets in Scorpio, or Scorpio is your ascendant, or moon in Scorpio, or other things where there's a lot of planets there, once you become attached to something, like emotionally attached, then there's this kind of willfulness in this battle that can take place, because the emotions are so deep that there's this fear that if this thing leaves, then what will I do? It's kind of like the terror of a mother and her child dying. Like, you don't even want to think about it. Like, you'll do anything to avoid that. I'll do anything to avoid that, right? So Scorpio has this kind of all or nothing, obsessive quality. And again, the obsessions, the external obsessions and fixations of Scorpio are, they can be very difficult for people around the Scorpio person. Like if a person has a lot of that energy, again, it doesn't have to be the ascendant or moon or whatever, but if a person has a lot of that sort of energy, it gets hard on those around them because of trying to handle that pressure. It can feel like a lot of pressure. So with Scorpio, there's always one of the great remedies for Scorpio energy is to be lighter. Not take everything so seriously, not try to control, because one of the things we do with fixed signs, they all have a control aspect to them. Not just Scorpio, but Taurus, Leo, and Aquarius can also be very sort of controlling and stubborn at the same time. They're like intractable. Like, they want things to be the way they are, and so they try to keep things where they are. sort of energy, and there can be a quality of sort of manipulation, of wanting situations to stay the way they are, so that, and what happens is, like with Scorpio, it can be like emotional manipulation, so that the person doesn't leave. Scorpio has that emotional depth, so they can sense, like let's say a Scorpio person, they can sense your emotional weaknesses, so they might try to do these little things to keep you there, or get you to do what they want or something. So I know it's a kind of stereotype of the negative Scorpio, but it's certainly there. Once that energy gets transformed, though, and there's less obsession and fixation on something external out of fear, because that's the fearful choice. The fearful choice is, uh-oh, this thing might leave, so I better do something to control it, right? Once that becomes absorbed and integrated, then that same energy becomes enormous depth and devotion. And the sign itself, because it's fixed water, there's also enormous amounts of loyalty. One of the things about fixed signs, all of them, is that there's a lot of loyalty there. They can be slow to start and slow to change. So these are a lot of the energies that we're experiencing right now. So with this new moon in Scorpio, sun and moon coming together, these are some of the qualities that we might be experiencing. Now, Saturn is also there. Saturn brings, again, more of a controlling quality as well. Because Saturn is also about control, but it's about external control. So when you get Scorpio, which is about emotional control, and again, the best thing is emotional self-control. When Scorpio has emotional self-control, then they don't need to control another person because they're in control of their own emotions. But emotional control, and Saturn is physical control, that could be, these are big themes that are happening right now. We realize where we don't have a lot of control, right? Where our sense of control is more and more ephemeral. We feel less and less in control right now. And we can see that in the world. So this is going to happen in the Nakshatra of Jyeshta. Jyeshta is ruled by Lord Indra, who was the king of the gods. And Indra was known for slaying the demon Vritra, who swallowed all the water. He stole the water from the earth. And so Indra allowed himself to be swallowed by the dragon. So he got swallowed by the demon or the dragon, and then cut himself, sliced open his belly, and escaped and returned the water to the earth. So you can see how this Nakshatra Jyeshta is very related to Scorpio, that same kind of transformation of being swallowed by our insecurities and our fears. This is what Scorpio tends to do. They tend to can get really consumed in the negative towards some outer person or situation that they think is the sort of, gateway to their feelings and their emotions. And then there's this kind of fear, so they kind of get swallowed, and then they need to sort of cut themselves out of the monster that swallowed them to return the water to the earth. So they have that courage to allow themselves to be swallowed as well. So this is also a great time when you can see your emotional resilience, because Scorpio is a sign of emotional resilience as well. It's an insect Rashi, and insects are very tenacious. Even though Scorpion is a very small animal, it's also the most. It's also the oldest. It's the most tenacious. It can survive things that other animals can't, like radiation and lack of food and lack of water. Very durable. So it's this enduring quality of the heart. This ancient wiring. This is what these symbols mean. They're very powerful. And the water signs all have symbols of things like fish and insects that are ancient creatures. And it refers to that ancient primal quality of feeling that's much deeper and much more primal than things like fire, which is action, and earth, which is form, and air, which is ideas. Feeling, it's very old wiring. Go back into past lives and into early primal, connections in this lifetime. So you might be experiencing those kinds of things as well. Now, there's a few interesting things about this new moon. In particular, what I'm struck by, because we also have Mars Rahu in Virgo, which is quite difficult. We've had Mars Rahu joined for several weeks now, about a month, and that's shown these terrorist attacks in Paris and in the U.S. and the heightened rhetoric about this and the sort of alarmed state of the world right now. But something else that's interesting is that we have this hemming going on. So Mercury, Venus are hemming Scorpio, where we have Saturn, Moon, and the Sun. So Mercury in Sagittarius and Venus in Libra are hemming, which means this is positive hemming, this difficult energy of Scorpio, because we've had Saturn and the Sun in Scorpio for about 3.5 weeks or so. So this Saturn and Sun have both been in Scorpio again, which has shown a lot of these difficult sort of terrorist events and these things that have shown us our vulnerabilities and our desire to want to control them. But right now, especially since Mercury broke out of that, we have Venus, Mercury hemming Scorpio, which means that there's enormous potential for wisdom and intelligence in the midst of all of these things I'm talking about. Flexibility, which is Mercury, and humanity, and finding of beauty and value, which is Venus. Notice how in the midst of all of the heated rhetoric, let's say like around Muslims and all of this stuff, notice how much compassion is also being pushed back against more, racist rhetoric. There's a very small portion that's amenable to this racist rhetoric, but most people are realizing, let's say as it relates on a cultural level, that that only compassion is going to win the day. And so this Venus and Mercury are hemming that fearful nature of these planets in Scorpio, and then Venus and Jupiter are hemming Mars and Rahu. Very similar, right? Venus and Jupiter are hemming Mars and Rahu in Virgo, because Jupiter is in Leo, Venus is in Virgo. Venus is in Libra, excuse me. Jupiter in Leo, Venus in Libra are hemming Mars, Rahu in Virgo. So the same sort of thing. Venus is in the middle of two important hemmings. One is Jupiter in Leo, and the other is Mercury in Sagittarius. So all of these malefics, which is Mars, Rahu in Virgo, Sun, Saturn, and also the Moon now in Scorpio, are all hemmed between Venus, Mercury, and Jupiter, this sort of chain of planets. So it's very inspiring, and this is why, even though there's a sense of alarm, there's a sense of urgency and perhaps danger, there's also a lot of, it's easy to see the hopeful outcome that black and white are getting very, contrasted. So those who are coming on the end of the, racist, difficult rhetoric are being revealed, and it's an opportunity for tolerance and higher teaching and higher wisdom to also win the day, and seeing the inspiring stories that also come out. And so again, I use the news events generally, because I'm not talking to an individual here, but you can see this individually in your life as well, because it's not just Saturn, Sun, and Scorpio in the world, and Mars, Rahu, and Virgo in the world. It's also happening in your life. If you have planets in these signs, it's been difficult, but now we have this hemming, so it's a great time to bring more compassion and honor and respect into those things that maybe where you feel that you've been terrorized, or where you feel like you've been mistreated and you've been trying to control it or lash out or attack. There's a better opportunity for more spaciousness around those choices now, rather than this sort of self-protective quality, because the truth is we have a lot of tamasic energy. Both Virgo and Scorpio are tamasic signs, and we have two tamasic planets in Virgo, which is Mars and Rahu, both in tamasic Virgo, and we have tamasic Saturn in tamasic Scorpio. So there you have it. is going to be a time to, this next month or so, as this new moon happens, is a time to really go deeper into your devotional practices, and rather than get obsessed over some outer result and fixated on some person or situation that you're afraid of, or that you want to try to control, or that you realize you have no control over, you need to get control of yourself, which is the only thing you really have control over anyway. Control of your own emotional state. And this is the greatness of Scorpio, the greatness of Saturn and the Sun in Scorpio. We're going to have Mars in Scorpio for about 7 months next year, so it's a good time to get your emotional life under control, because you're going to have to at that time. So go deeper into your spiritual practices and see how that works. If you want to see how this influences your sign, for only 1 penny, if you haven't gotten my forecast before, for only 1 penny you can hear how this is going to influence your sign, what this Scorpio cycle means for you. Only 1 penny, and you'll get the forecast for your sign and all the other signs as well. And so we'll leave it at that. Share this with others if it's been helpful to you.